Our guest today is the Archbishop of Chicago. He was appointed by His Holiness Pope Francis just over 3 months ago. Our guest today was ordained to the priesthood for the Archdiocese of Omaha, his hometown, in 1975. Number 2, was ordained and installed as Bishop of Rapid City, South Dakota in 1998. And number 3, our guest today was installed as Bishop of Spokane, Washington in 2010. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy from the College of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. Our guest today attended seminary at the North American College and Gregorian University in Rome. He is a graduate of Catholic University, where he received his license of sacred theology and earned his PhD in sacramental theology. Our guest today, as I mentioned, is one of 9 children, 5 sisters, not 8, and 3 brothers. Ladies and gentlemen, Archbishop Blase Cupich. Archbishop.
Thank you, Jay, for that nice introduction. Jay is a very wise man. By acknowledging his sisters, I can tell you with my 5, they would have wanted to make sure that I recognize him as well. It's great to be with you here today, and I learned just talking to the people at table the fine work that you do, but also the networking that is accomplished by your coming together on a regular basis, and the exchange of information that takes place. I really do commend that. I find that to be really a healthy sign of a community when people who come at life differently with different backgrounds are willing to sit down and break bread and hear viewpoints that are different. We all learn when that takes place. So I would encourage you to continue in this wonderful enterprise that you have going. As you can imagine, when I came here, since I really didn't know anyone at all for the most part, I received tons of advice about things. Lots of advice. And in fact, I even received a good amount of advice about what I should say today and how I should frame my remarks. It was suggested that I take that insight that I was told about in terms of the name of Chicago and use that. That is, Chicago is a Native American word that means land of smelly onions. And the point was to use the onion as a metaphor to speak about the many layers of this city that's ever revealing its complexity, with the outmost layers of the lakefront and the far suburbs tapering off into the prairie and homeland, as it was put to me. A city that is always reinventing itself by shedding its skin, continually looking different than before. But the problem is I couldn't quite figure out what to do with the smelly part of that metaphor. So I've decided to go in a different direction. And it's great to be here with you today. What I do want to do is begin with a question that was asked to me when I first came, and in fact these days since November when I was installed. What do you think of Chicago? What is your impression of Chicago? That's a great question, because Chicago is an impressive city in the sense that it leaves a mark on people. It evokes a response. It taps into the deepest aspirations of people and draws out qualities which otherwise are hidden and overlooked. So there are 3 impressions that I want to talk about today, about how as I reflect on my first weeks here in Chicago, which are qualities that I think can be held up and seen as useful as we together as leaders approach the various challenges that are currently facing us. First of all, Chicago is a city of many languages, where people use different words. But when they use the word for home, in whatever language, they all mean Chicago. I like living downtown and walking through the streets. Even going the short distance from Holy Name Cathedral to Quickly Pastoral Center, I hear no fewer than 3 or 4 languages. I also know that Mass in the Archdiocese is celebrated every weekend in 25 different languages. Yet, as I meet people of different languages, whether in our churches or as pedestrians on the streets, it's clear to me that no one seems to be a foreigner or consider themselves a foreigner. In fact, these strangers are very much at home here. But isn't that what it truly means to be an international city? A place where strangers and newcomers feel at home? There is ample evidence that the diversity which immigration brings has enriched our city, not to mention our country. From its earliest days, Chicago has drawn immigrants and refugees here because this is a city that readily gives the impression that it welcomes newcomers to call Chicago home, and that it honors people who take the risk of starting out fresh. Their aspirations have always been the same as all of us, to find a better life, to care for our families, to leave behind poverty, violence, and oppression. It seems to me that we should all take pride that this city leaves such an impression on people, especially our newcomers. It is a quality that should encourage us to embrace comprehensive immigration reform that invites people to come out of the shadows and take their rightful place in the economy and in our city, and makes Chicago their home. Together, we can make this happen, and we all have an important part in making this happen. The second impression. Chicago is also a city that impresses the imagination, a city that inspires and does so in a very unique way. Ours is not a town of delicate and dainty refinement, but rather one that has the finesse and subtlety of common sense. Or to paraphrase Carl Sandburg, we may have dust over our mouth, but we're laughing with white teeth, as a fighter laughs who has never lost a battle. The sculptures that decorate our plazas, the distinctive architecture that pierces through the heavens, the music and performing arts that ennoble us, and our athletic teams that at times beguile, if not enrage us, leave an impression which uniquely inspires the imagination to look at the ordinary, the commonplace, even the mundane with fresh eyes, alerting that something deeper is part of reality. It is a kind of inspiration that moved Joe Torre this past week to pen these words about Ernie Banks. If his physical talents caught your eye, then it was his jubilant approach toward life that caught your heart. He was living proof that you do not have to wear a championship ring on your finger in order to be a champion of life. Torre recalled that quality of Mr. Cub to urge us to live our lives in a way that inspires especially our youth. Young people need that kind of motivation and encouragement to excel, which comes by engaging their imagination about all their possibilities open to them. Possibilities open to them in the ordinary, not the spectacular. Whether that be in their schools, their families, inspiring them to be open to the enrichment in the everyday, to take the jubilant approach to life, as Ernie Banks did. Kids are in trouble today. They are at risk in many ways, but above all, because too many have no hope about their future. They resort too often to joining gangs and becoming immersed in violence. We adults could provide a great service to kids if all of us would be more intentional about making decisions that inspire their imagination, inspire them about the value of education, to the point that they and their families would be given more choice about the schools they could attend. Inspire them about the long-term benefits of making a commitment and of working hard. Inspire them, especially in this world of hyper-celebrity and competition, to organize their lives around the truth that you do not have to wear a championship ring on your finger in order to be a champion of life. Our city's unique quality to inspire the imagination should challenge all of us who have a leadership role in society, parent, teacher, elected official, business executive, clergy, labor leaders, to make decisions that intentionally inspire the imagination of our youth, that have the power to leave an impression that the extraordinary is most often experienced in the ordinary. This city of the extraordinary ordinary has the quality to take up that challenge. Together, we can make this happen. We all have an important part in making this happen. Again, Carl Sandburg, come and show me another city with lifted heads singing, so proud to be alive and coarse and strong and cunning. My final impression, we are a city that's not constrained by the natural topography around us, but one that is continually changing, rising above its limitations, building on creation. Nature may have made us flatlanders, but as newcomers have quickly learned, that has not held us back from giving our city altitude, and should I add, a certain attitude. It has been pointed out by others that creation in the Bible begins in a garden, but reaches fulfillment in the building of a city where God dwells. There are many today who have little hope or chance of rising above the flat land, the ground floor of human existence. We know the inequality in society, the impact of racism that has left people poor over generations, and the plain truth that some children of God are born with limitations or lack the gifts and the opportunities that we all take for granted. Just as we have been able to change the topography of this city with our towering skyscrapers, can we not also build up those who are limited by nature or history and work together to build a city where we can claim God would want to dwell? Together we can make this happen. We all have an important part in making this happen. So in answer to the question, what are your impressions, Archbishop, about Chicago? I would have to say I'm impressed that this is a city of many languages, where people use different words, but when they speak about home, they mean Chicago. And that leaves me encouraged to work with all of you who hold leadership responsibilities to make sure that other newcomers continue to be impressed this way and quickly come to feel at home here. I'm also impressed that this is a city that inspires the imagination to appreciate the extraordinary in the ordinary, to the point that it should move us to work together, to encourage our youth to stand against gangs, to reject violence, to realize their gifts in making a contribution to our community. Then they can lift their heads, singing so proud to be alive in the coarse, the strong, and the cunning. And finally, it is a city that is not held back to overcome its natural limitations, but has both the altitude and the attitude, unafraid to build up the true city, not its buildings, but its people, humbly admitting that but for the grace of God, we are all flatlanders. In the measure, my impressions are also your convictions. I look forward in the years to come to a collaboration of government and business, labor, religious institutions to make a great city even greater. I do so realizing that I follow in the footsteps of great leaders of the past, like my immediate predecessor, Cardinal George, for whom I once again ask your prayers. I'm also aware that I have been appointed the head of a historic faith community that also happens to be one of the city's largest employers, educators, healthcare, and social service providers. It is humbling to know that a relatively small percentage of the lives the Archdiocese of Chicago touches every year is Catholic, a fact that impresses upon me the obligation that I have to be willing and an eager partner with you in the mainstream of this city's enterprises. I'm always grateful for the advice that I've received, and I look forward to your advice. And I was advised and grateful for the advice that was given to me about how I should begin this talk. But I'm really glad that I passed it up. Because, as you see, this city is more than a land of smelly onions. And besides, I would rather be known as the Archbishop of Chicago. Thank you.
If you have any questions, do we have the, by the way, they'll be going around, but you don't have to make any, it's not a plate, it's a bowl. That's the only one, Jackie. I'm not going anymore. That's it. That's it. Thank you very much. From Carolyn, we start off on a high level, sir. Carolyn Sweeney, one of Jay's sisters. He's already dropping his head. There are a few jobs that people would only take if they were called by God. Yours is one. Why do you think that God called you to come to Chicago? Easy one. Knock it off.
I'm going to pass this off to Pope Francis because he was the one who appointed me. I have no idea, but I would say this. Somebody mentioned to me, a good friend of mine says that I've been a bishop almost 20 years now and a priest for 40. And I can see that, and all of us maybe can look at our own lives this way too, as you look at it in terms of the trajectory and the journey that you've been on. There were significant moments in which I really learned things that were important that I know are going to be resources of memory for me as I take up on this work. So I feel as though, there's always been a sense in my life about what I'm supposed to be doing at a certain point. And if I've always focused on that and done the job, not only do I go in the right direction, but I also learn from it. And I think that maybe that will help me to move forward in the work that I have here, remembering the lessons that I've learned in the past. And I feel that all those lessons have prepared me for a moment now. And I would have to believe that the grace of God was working in those moments. So.
Mr. Archbishop, in this club personifies it. There's often a very thin line between politics and religion. Very thin line. This is from Brian Hopkins, candidate for 2nd Ward Alderman. And his most important credential, a former student of mine. Are you satisfied with your choice to reside in the rectory instead of the mansion? And can I stop by with a voter registration form? Welcome to Chicago, sir.
Yes and yes. My decision was not so much not to live in the residence. It was to live at Holy Name Cathedral. It was intentional because I wanted a place where I could have access to people on a regular basis. I have Mass today. I had Mass at the parish, which I do maybe 3 or 4 times a week, depending on what the schedule is. I like being able to walk downtown, and I love the large sidewalks along Michigan Avenue and elsewhere to see the hustle and bustle of life. It's also 2 minutes to the office. It makes it easy for me. And I like the community environment. I think there are 8 or 9 priests who live there in the rectory, and it's a great support system for me. So my decision was for something, not against something.
No politics involved. Here we go. Carlos Ponce. Where are you, Carlos? All right. This is a fill in the blank. A key Chicago question. I know what you're going to say, but let them all hear it. Remember, I'm quoting, remember God is listening. Are you a Cubs fan or a Sox fan?
Well, ever since the Second Vatican Council, I'm part of the ecumenical movement.
Getting better and better, isn't it? Oh, here he is, Mark Weiermuller. Where are you? Oh, right over there. A Republican, remember that. Do you have advice? Oh, God. No. That was unintentional. Unintentional. Do you have advice for our politicians to bring them together? 25 words or less, sir.
Yeah, I would say put aside your preconceived notions about each other and people. Everybody's different and comes at things differently. You know who taught me that the most were the Native American people on the 5 reservations where I was pastor in South Dakota. Everybody would always ask me, what do the Native Americans think about this? And Native Americans would quickly say to me, you cannot pigeonhole all of us. We each think differently. And the way that they always have their meetings, their councils, are in a circle to make sure that there's no pecking order, that people in the circle all have a chance to speak their mind. So I would say have a respect for the other person to, in such a way that you put aside, you check at the door any preconceived notions about what's possible or what they're thinking. I think that works.
He's on a roll. Okay, Ed Mazer, very small handwriting here, Ed. I'm not sure what you're trying.
Make it legible.
All right. Are you asking him, does he like to barbecue?
Yeah, the other night when he was on TTW, he said that His Eminence said one of his favorite activities was barbecuing. He'd have the 78 priests in the Spokane.
Got it. All right.
Over.
Okay.
I was listening.
Ed wants to know, do you have a special barbecue sauce? And is it blessed? Well, you talk about hard-hitting questions.
I really don't. I use this, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a nice Cajun powder that I put on stuff, but that's about it, okay?
Mr. Archbishop, I have one question for you since I've been to Omaha. Have you ever eaten at the Drovers?
The Drovers?
The steakhouse?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever eaten at Leavenworth on the breakfast place on 11th Street? No. And how close are you to Warren Buffett?
Well, it's interesting. I was appointed my first parish as an associate in Omaha, Nebraska at St. Margaret Mary's, which is right across the street from the university. And in the confines of that parish, Warren Buffett's house is. It still remains. He still lives there. But we never had the courage to send him envelopes. But I can tell you, he's a well-respected man. He does a lot of good, great sense of humor. If you ever seen him interviewed, does a lot of good, has really given us all an example about not being attached to the amount of wealth that he's accumulated, the way that he has set up his own foundation to merge with the Gates Foundation. I think there's something very admirable about the way that he has conducted himself. He's one of the most respected men in Omaha today, people in Omaha, and not just because of his wealth and financial acumen, but just for being a decent human being. And so I'm proud to be from the same city.
There you go. That's it, Your Eminence. Here.